The real Frank Abagnale has lied to us for about 50 years. It was only when author Alan C. Logan debunked his lies that the truth came out. Catch Me If You Can, the film directed by Steven Spielberg, portrays a fascinating yet highly embellished account of Abagnale's life. The movie follows young Frank as he cons his way through the world by posing as a Pan Am pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer, while FBI agent Carl Hanratty relentlessly pursues him. While some elements in the movie are grounded in reality, many of the most thrilling aspects of Abagnale's story were fabricated. In reality, Frank Abagnale did work for the FBI after his capture, and the agent who arrested him, Joseph Shea, Carl Hanratty in the film, did indeed work with him. However, many of the details of his life story, as told in the movie by Abagnale himself, are exaggerated or entirely false. Frank's earlier criminal activities, including running up debts on his father's gas card and other small-time scams, which were not as glamorous as the high-profile cons depicted in the movie. Frank started shoplifting at an early age, and when he was 15, he perpetrated his first con on his own father. Frank Sr., in addition to a bank account with plenty of blank checks, had given him a gas card and a truck to help him commute to his part-time job. But Jr. quickly ran up his father's gas card to $3,400, equivalent to $28,300 today. Frank would buy a ton of auto parts with his dad's credit card and then return them to different stores for cash. The film portrays Frank as an only child driven by his parents' divorce. In reality, Abagnale had two brothers and a sister. His parents did divorce, but many of the details about his family life were simplified or altered for dramatic effect. Frank's parents divorced when he was 14, not 16, and Frank wasn't an only child. His father remarried rather quickly, and Frank did see his father again because he lived with him for 2 years. After getting busted for the gas card thefts, his mother sent him to boarding school, but he didn't stay long. At 16, Frank ran away, changed his driver's license birth date, and joined the Navy between 1964 and 1965. After getting booted from the Navy, Frank stole a Mustang and drove from New York to California, where he was arrested for trying to pass a bad check at a local bank in Eureka. His father, who Frank claims he never saw again, flew to California to bring his son back to New York. Due to his father's poor financial situation, the judge charged him only $1 for bail. 2 weeks after Frank got back to New York from his claimed world travels, the Tuckahoe police arrested him for stealing blank checks from the service station where he allegedly racked up fraudulent credit card bills. He began serving a 3-year prison sentence at the Great Meadow Prison in Comstock, New York, for those crimes. At this point, his arrest completely debunked his entire story from when he was 16 years old about impersonating a world-traveling pilot, but there is more to the story. Frank received early parole from his sentence in 1967. However, he was quickly arrested again in Boston on charges of grand theft auto and check fraud. He served 4 months in jail in Boston for those new crimes. After finishing the 4 months in jail in Boston, he was returned to prison in New York to serve out the remainder of his original sentence due to violating his parole terms. He was finally released from prison in 1969 at the age of 21. So at the age of 21 in 1969, Frank was released from jail having completed his full prison term. Literally days after, he scammed the TWA airline pilot uniform, not a Pan Am uniform. However, he did impersonate a TWA pilot in New York, sitting on the jump seat, and that's where he met flight attendant Paula Parks. Frank developed an obsession with Paula, which he turned into a bizarre and lengthy con. He learned her work schedule and tried to create opportunities to meet her by pretending to be a pilot and positioning himself on her flights. Despite his efforts, Paula was not charmed and saw through his lies. He kept insisting again and again until he went to her house, and she finally invited him to stay with her family. Under the lie that he was a laid-off pilot, Abagnale conned his way into living at Parks' household in Baton Rouge. While staying with Paula's family, Abagnale stole their personal checks and passed bad ones around town to pay for meals, gifts, and expenses, directly contradicting his famous claim that he never scammed individuals, only corporations like airlines and banks. Logan claims Abagnale stole about $1,200 from the Parks family, equivalent to about $10,000 today. It was a family friend, a local reverend, who got suspicious and called Delta to check if Abagnale was a pilot like he said. After Delta confirmed he was not, the reverend called the police. Abagnale was then arrested by the Baton Rouge police in February 1969 for passing bad checks and theft from Paula's father's checkbook. Despite being convicted and initially sentenced to 12 years in prison, the same reverend who turned him in convinced the judge to give Abagnale a lighter sentence of probation, psychological treatment, and repaying instead of hard time. However, Abagnale violated probation and ran away again. This is when Logan states Abagnale went to France, where he was arrested again for scamming 2 other friendly families who took him in. After serving time in a French prison, he was extradited to Sweden, where he did another stint in jail for grand theft auto before eventually being deported back to the United States in June 1970. It was in the late summer of 1970, when Abagnale was 22 years old, not 16 as he had claimed, that he finally acquired the Pan Am pilot uniform. However, contrary to his memoir describing an avalanche of fake Pan Am payroll checks worth millions of dollars, Logan determined Abagnale actually only passed about 10 checks, totaling around $1,200. Abagnale cashed the first one of these checks in July 1970 in North Carolina, then spaced out the others in cities like Dallas, Houston, Tucson, and California before getting sloppy and cashing several in Provo, Utah, which quickly caught the attention of authorities. Once Pan Am discovered Abagnale's fraudulent checks, the FBI began searching for him. He was arrested in 1970 and sentenced to 10 years for the Pan Am scheme. Contrary to his story, he never escaped from Atlanta's federal penitentiary and wasn't held there. He did escape from Georgia's Cobb County Jail in 1971. Despite Abagnale's claim, the FBI does not officially recognize him as having worked for them in any significant capacity. Also, the dramatic escape scene where Frank escapes from a plane through the toilet is pure fiction. Aviation engineers have confirmed that such an escape is impossible. In reality, Abagnale did escape custody, but not through an airplane toilet. He slipped out of a detention center by posing as an undercover prison inspector. The film shows Frank passing the Louisiana bar exam after studying for just 2 weeks. In reality, while Abagnale did claim to have passed the bar, there is no conclusive evidence that he actually did so. His legal escapades were likely less impressive than portrayed. The movie also suggests Frank and the FBI agent who caught him became close friends, but there's no proof that that happened. It also condenses Frank's criminal timeline and time in various prisons for drama, whereas he actually did multiple stints in prison instead of continually evading capture. Today at age 75, Abagnale continues to run Abagnale & Associates as well as the firm Abagnale Secure Outreach. He travels the world giving speeches to corporations detailing his former life as a con man. Despite the truths exposed about his exaggerated stories, Abagnale has maintained his fame and a lucrative career built on the catch-me-if-you-can persona.